What type of utilities should be included on a land title survey or an ALTA survey? That's what people call them, ALTA surveys. I had that question come up a few weeks ago. We were working on a land title survey, and the title company told the client's attorney that they couldn't give final approval to the ALTA survey because we hadn't shot a couple of hose bibs, and so they wanted us to go back out and shoot a couple of hose bibs, hose faucets. And their argument was, well, the surveyor is required to show all utilities, and everybody knew that wasn't true. The title company was stalling for time. We were under pressure to get this transaction wrapped up, and they were just looking for ways to pin the delay, the blame for the delay on the land surveyor. And make a long story short, the transaction ended up closing without me having to go out and survey any hose bibs. But it brought up an interesting question I hadn't thought about before, which is, what does the spec, the land title survey specification, actually say about what utilities a surveyor has to survey? And so I wanted to do a video that explained that. Okay, so I'm going to just read you what the spec says about utilities. This is under section 5E. Okay, and this is a change. I believe this happened in 2016. So it used to be utilities were optional. They were table A item, optional table A item, and they changed that in 2016, and they moved some mapping of utilities into the actual body of the spec. What that means is it's no longer optional. So I do have to survey some utilities as a land surveyor. Okay, now there's still an optional item in table A to actually have the surveyor evaluate as-built, utility as-built drawings, and to work with a utility locator and then survey utility mark and locate paint marks or flags. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about here. So what I'm talking about is what am I required to do just based on what's in the body of the spec now after 2016. Okay, so I'm going to read this to you. It's from the 2021 spec. This is in section 5E. So it says evidence of easements observed in the process of conducting the field work if they are on or across the surveyed property. And that what kind of evidence includes utility service lines, utility locate markings, ditches, drains, telephone lines, fiber optic lines, electric lines, water lines, sewer lines, oil pipelines, and gas pipelines. Okay, so that's part one. It's actually part two, sorry. That's 5E, part two. Okay, here's the next part, part three. Surface indications of underground easements or servitudes on or across the surveyed property observed in the process of conducting the fieldwork, utility cuts, vent pipes, filler pipes, utility locate markings. Okay, and then the last one here, this is 4. So this is section 5E4. Evidence on or above the surface of the surveyed property observed in the process of conducting the field work, which evidence may indicate utilities located on, over, or beneath the surveyed property. Examples of such evidence include pipeline markers, utility locate markings, manholes, valves, meters, transformers, pedestals, cleanouts, overhead lines, guy wires, and utility poles on or within 10 feet of the surveyed property. Okay, so what does that mean? That's great. That sounds like something a lawyer wrote. So let's try and explain it in language that everyday people can understand. So here's how I interpret the spec. Okay, so there's two things I have to do about utilities. I'm required to do these two things based on the body of the specification. Okay. If I observe evidence of utilities anywhere on the property during my survey that I think could indicate the presence of an easement, I have to locate it. Okay. So that's the first thing. Now that applies anywhere on the property. Okay. The second thing I have to do is if there is a utility feature within 10 feet of the property line on the subject parcel, so the inside 10 feet, I have to survey it. Okay. If I see it during the field survey, I have to survey it. Okay. Now let's just explain. So what's the difference between those two things? Okay. So there's a couple differences. The first two sections there, 3 and, let's see, was it 3 and 4? 2 and 3, the first two sections, I think are talking about basically the same thing. So section 2, section 3. So 5E, 2 and 3. That's talking about utilities anywhere on the property, not just the 10 feet around the edge, anywhere on the property. What it's saying is if I find utilities anywhere on the property during my survey that I think could indicate there's an easement, I have to survey them. Okay? So that applies anywhere on the property. Now, the next section, section 4, that only applies within that 10-foot strip around the edge of the property, and they're not giving me wiggle room there. They're saying, Landon, if you're doing a survey and you see a utility in that 10 feet, you've got to survey it. Okay. Now, there's a couple caveats there that are really important. There's some nuances, right? All these bullet items, subsections of Section 5E say stuff I observed during the field survey. Okay. So what that doesn't require is me to go in and do a comprehensive search for any kind of surface utilities. That's not what it says. What it says is, if I'm out doing the field survey and I'm going to trip over a manhole lid or a guy wire or a pole, I need to survey it. It says observe during the field work, right? Now, there's all kinds of situations where I may not observe a surface utility during the field work because it's under vegetation or brush, or there's a car parked on top of it, or I don't walk that particular part of the property if it's a big parcel, right? So you can't put the surveyor on the hook for every utility on the property. That's not what it says. First of all, it says I've got to see it during the field work, and I've got to think that it might be that there might be a logical requirement for there to be an easement. Okay, so let me tell you what that means to me as a surveyor. What that means is I'm not worried about what I call owner-maintained utilities. Okay, so a lot of especially commercial real estate, the actual property owner will maintain their own private utilities on the site. Communication lines, air lines, water lines, right? Those aren't maintained by a utility company or a public utility service provider. They're private facilities. Okay, what the spec says is, if I know those facilities are private or I suspect they're private, I don't have to survey them. Now, just to cover my own rear end, a lot of times we will still note those features on the survey if we see them while we're doing the field work, but we'll indicate that they're probably an owner-maintained facility. Okay. If, however, I see a utility feature on the property during the survey, anywhere on the property, and I think to myself, that might be somebody else's utility, then I have to show it. Okay. Now, when we get to the edge of the property, the 10 feet, it doesn't matter if I think it's owner-maintained or not, I've got to show it. Okay, because it's on the edge of the property, and the lender and the title company want to see it. Okay. So there's a little bit of there's a subtle difference there between what I got to show within 10 feet and what I have to show on the whole property. Now, again, I do think there's some things that don't fall into the category of utilities. Okay, and so as an example, I would say landscape irrigation. Okay, sprinklers and sprinkler valves, right? I don't think that falls into the spec, and it doesn't say that in the spec. That's just my opinion. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll put a note on the survey that says that's not included. Now, what if somebody says, well, we want to know where all the landscape irrigation's at? Okay, I'm happy to do that. That's going to cost some money, right? You could have 3,000 sprinkler heads on a big piece of property, right? I have a problem. If you want to see it, if you think it's important, we can show it, but there's a fee for that. Okay, so just kind of to recap, the spec requires me to do two things with utilities during a land title survey, okay? And the difference between the two things is whether or not it's within 10 feet of the property line or not, okay? If it's within 10 feet of the property line and it's a significant utility, I have to show it. If I see it during the field work, I have to show it, okay? If it's on the rest of the property, okay, so it's not within the 10-foot strip, but it's somewhere else on the property, and I think it might be somebody else's utility, then I have to show it if I see it during the field work. Okay, those are the rules. So, does that cover hose bibs? In my opinion, it doesn't. It doesn't cover hose bibs. It doesn't cover landscape irrigation, sprinklers, or valve boxes. Okay, it doesn't include sight light for a parking lot. As a general rule, those things are not included. Okay, now I'm willing to show them. Okay, but if you really want a comprehensive idea of what utilities are on the site, then you got to check the table A. You got to check those options on the table A, get the record drawings, the utility as-built, and get a mark and locate. Right? And we'll do that for you. You want to mark and locate? I know utility locators. We'll hire them. We'll get the site marked and located, and we will show that stuff on our survey. Okay, but that costs money. So you can't hang the surveyor for not showing a couple hose bibs if you didn't pay for the as-built drawings and the utility mark and locate work.